Hi, I've made a new channel called Lunala Tales. On this channel, I'll upload the stories you ask for. Just comment below what kind of story you want, and I'll make it here on Lunala Tales. The link is in the description. Subscribe now, and tell me what story you want next. The first thing the Galactic enforcers heard was the nurse laughing as the ceiling collapsed. Not screaming, not panicking like everyone else in the medical ward, but laughing. A deep, belly-aching laugh that echoed through the smoke and fire as if this was the funniest thing she had seen in years. Private Carrick, holding his bleeding arm and a face full of dust, blinked at her through the chaos and muttered to the squad sergeant that this nurse might be completely insane. The sergeant was about to agree when the nurse strolled out of the debris with a smirk and a syringe bigger than a plasma dagger, wiping soot off her uniform like she had just tripped on a sidewalk instead of surviving a missile strike. That was the first clue that something about this woman was off. Lyra didn't look like the kind of nurse you would want around in a crisis. She was short, with hair chopped unevenly as if she had cut it herself using a knife and a mirror, and she wore the standard white medical smock that had been patched so many times it looked like it was holding on for dear life. Her boots didn't even match. Yet somehow, as she approached the injured soldiers, there was a calmness about her that made the sirens, the chaos, even the enforcers shouting fade into the background. She jabbed Carrick with the syringe so fast he didn't have time to protest. "What is in that thing?" he demanded, wincing. "Painkiller. Muscle regenerator. Some caffeine, maybe," she said casually, as if she had just poured him a cup of tea instead of what felt like molten fire running through his veins. "Don't whine. You're lucky you still have the arm." The rest of the squad snickered. Carrick was always the loudest in the unit, the kind of man who complained about bad coffee while facing down enemy fire. Seeing him silenced by a tiny woman with a lopsided haircut was the best entertainment they had gotten all week. The enforcers had been sent to Elysian Prime for what was supposed to be shore leave after their last mission went spectacularly wrong. Instead, within 3 hours of landing, someone launched a missile at the base, the barracks were in pieces, and now they were in the outpost medical ward with a nurse who treated exploding buildings like minor inconveniences. While Lyra worked, the squad leaned against the walls, nursing bruises and burns, trading jokes about how this was shaping up to be the worst vacation in the galaxy. At some point one of them, a young recruit named Vess, pointed at Lyra's arm as she rolled up her sleeve to bandage a cut on her own wrist. "Hey, nice tattoo," he said with a grin. "Let me guess. Broken heart? Lost love?" The others laughed. It was a strange design, a swirl of crimson ink curling into shapes that looked half like letters, half like a beast with wings, wrapped around a symbol none of them recognized. It stretched from her wrist to her elbow like a ribbon of old secrets. She didn't answer, just kept cleaning the cut with a focus that suggested she hadn't even heard them. "Come on," the sergeant said, smirking. "Tell us. It's not every day we see a nurse with war paint. What's it mean?" For the first time since they met her, Lyra paused. Slowly she turned her head toward them, her eyes calm but cold enough to make Vess shift uncomfortably. She opened her mouth as if to answer, but before she could speak, a voice from the corner said very softly, "That's not war paint." Everyone turned. The voice belonged to Sergeant Harrow, the oldest member of the squad. He was the kind of soldier who never laughed, never drank, and never joined in when the others swapped stories about ridiculous missions. He was currently sitting on a cot, half his face wrapped in bandages, staring at Lyra's arm like he had seen a ghost. "Harrow, what are you talking about?" the sergeant asked. "I've seen that symbol before," Harrow said slowly, his voice tight. "A long time ago. The Bloodstar order." The room went silent. The younger soldiers exchanged confused looks. The Bloodstar order was something they had heard only in fragments, old stories told by veterans who spoke about it like a nightmare best left buried. A squad that had existed decades ago, operating beyond normal military rules, whispered to have ended in betrayal and massacre. Some said they were assassins. Others said they were heroes turned rogue. That order was wiped out, Harrow continued, his eyes never leaving Lyra. Completely erased after Ardent Prime. No survivors. None. Lyra finally spoke, her voice flat. That's what they wanted people to believe. Vess laughed nervously, trying to break the tension. Wait. Are you saying our nurse here was part of some ancient death squad? Seriously? Nobody laughed with him. Harrow's hands curled into fists. I was on Ardent Prime, he said quietly. I saw what the Bloodstar Order did before they fell. Whole enemy fleets gone in hours. And then the betrayal. Half the galaxy turned on them overnight. The people who carried that mark, they weren't just soldiers. They were something else. Something the rest of us were scared of. Lyra wrapped her arm calmly, ignoring the stares. Her face gave nothing away, but there was a shadow behind her eyes now, something none of them could read. The sergeant finally cleared his throat. So what happened? To the Order, I mean. Lyra finished tying the bandage before answering. What always happens, she said softly. Someone we trusted sold us out. No one spoke after that. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Even the alarms outside seemed distant now. Then the base commander burst through the door, pale and shaking. Enemy fleet sighted, he barked. Warlord Draven. His back. And his brought the Doomsday engine with him. Lyra closed her eyes for half a second, as if she had been expecting this. When she opened them, the calm was gone. In its place was something sharp and dangerous that made even the battle-hardened enforcers take a step back. Looks like shore leave's over, she said, reaching for the rifle leaning against the wall. The room emptied fast after the commander's announcement, enforcers rushing to grab weapons, armor, and whatever supplies had survived the missile strike. Outside, sirens wailed as Elysian Prime's defense grid scrambled to prepare for what everyone knew was coming. But while the soldiers moved with the frantic energy of people bracing for disaster, Lyra walked slowly, deliberately, as if she had already seen this war before and knew exactly how it would unfold. That unsettled them even more than the alarms. Sergeant Harrow stayed behind as the others left, staring at her like he was piecing together a puzzle from decades ago. He still remembered the way the Bloodstar Order's insignia had been described in briefing reports, the classified files so heavily redacted they were almost blank pages. The symbol etched into Lyra's skin matched them exactly. A symbol that had become legend and warning both. He finally spoke, his voice low. Ardent Prime. That was you, wasn't it? Lyra glanced at him, then out the shattered window where the smoke from the missile strike still curled into the sky. The wind carried the metallic tang of burning circuits and plasma fire. For a moment she seemed far away, not in the present but in some distant memory buried under years of silence. We were supposed to end the war, she said finally. That was the plan. One mission. One strike to cut the enemy's throat so clean they wouldn't even know they were bleeding until it was over. And we did it. For a while. Harrow waited. She went on, her tone flat but her eyes holding something hard and bitter. The Bloodstar Order was built for things ordinary soldiers couldn't do. Deep strikes. Assassinations. Sabotage so precise it looked like accidents. We carried no flags, no names. Just the mark. When people saw it, they knew it meant the war was already lost for them. Her words carried no pride, only the heavy weight of memory. But then came Ardent Prime, she said. Our last mission. Or it was supposed to be. Take out the enemy leadership in one night. End the whole conflict before the galaxy bled itself dry. We did it. Everything went perfectly. Too perfectly. Harrow felt the chill in her voice. The next day half the sector turned on us, she said. Our locations leaked. Our ships sabotaged. The people we thought were allies were waiting for us with fleets twice our size. We lost 3/4 of the Order before we even realized we'd been betrayed. The rest scattered. Hunted down one by one. Harrow's jaw tightened. He had heard the stories, fragments carried by refugees and deserters. Entire cities burning. Bloodstar operatives dying in every corner of the galaxy as if someone had made it their personal crusade to erase them from existence. Who betrayed you? He asked. Lyra's eyes were cold now. We never found out. Maybe someone high up. Maybe more than one. All I know is the war ended, the victors wrote the history, and the Bloodstar Order became the villains because dead soldiers don't argue. She turned then, facing him fully for the first time. And now Draven is back. Harrow blinked. The name carried weight. Draven the Warlord. The man who had nearly toppled the central systems before disappearing after Ardent Prime. Most thought he had died in the chaos following the Bloodstar purge. We killed him, Harrow said slowly. I saw the reports. Lyra gave a small, humorless smile. Then maybe he got better. Outside, thunder rolled as defense cannons fired into the sky, the first distant flashes of battle lighting up the horizon. The enforcers gathered near the landing pads, checking weapons and arguing about whether they were about to fight a warlord with a reputation for burning planets or run for the nearest transport, and Hope Command didn't notice. When Lyra stepped out into the open, the conversation stopped. She moved with the quiet assurance of someone who had walked through worse and survived. Without looking at anyone, she headed for the central command tent where officers shouted orders over comms and screens flickered with incoming reports. The base commander, a broad man with sweat running down his temples, looked up in irritation as she entered. "We're a little busy, Ness," he snapped. Then he saw the mark on her arm and went pale. "You," he said. "I thought you people were all dead." "So did we," Lyra said. She studied the tactical display where red blips marked enemy ships moving toward Elysian Prime. At the center pulsed a larger signal, the Doomsday Engine, a name spoken in terrified whispers across half the galaxy. Rumored to be capable of wiping out entire star systems in one shot, though no one had ever seen it fired. Some thought it was just a myth. "Apparently not," Lyra murmured. The commander hesitated before clearing his throat. "We have 3 squadrons inbound, 1 defense grid half-functional, and maybe 6 hours before that thing reaches firing range. Unless you have a miracle tucked in your medical kit, I suggest you pray to whatever gods you like." Lyra ignored him. Her eyes tracked the enemy fleet's formation, the attack vectors, the weak points no one else seemed to see. She spoke quietly but with absolute certainty. "You're looking at it wrong. He isn't here to destroy the planet. Not yet. He wants something." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. "What makes you so sure?" the commander demanded. "Because I know him," Lyra said. Silence fell. She turned from the display and headed for the landing pads where the enforcers waited. Some watched her with open suspicion now, as if unsure whether she was about to save them or drag them into something far worse. "What's the plan?" the sergeant asked cautiously. Lyra checked the rifle she had taken from the armory, the weapon fitting in her hands like it belonged there. "The plan is simple," she said. "We find out what Draven wants before he gets it. And then we stop him." Vess, the youngest, laughed nervously. "Just like that? Against a fleet?" Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Against him," she said softly. "The fleet doesn't matter." The sky lit up again as enemy fire slammed into the outer defenses. The ground shook beneath their feet. And somewhere far above, the Doomsday Engine drifted closer, silent and waiting, like the edge of the world about to fall. The enforcers had been in desperate situations before, but marching behind a nurse who acted like she was strolling to a market instead of heading straight into a war zone was a new experience even for them. The sergeant kept glancing at Lyra as if expecting her to start issuing orders like some long-lost general, but she didn't. She just walked, calm and steady, while the sky above rumbled with the thunder of orbital weapons. The men exchanged uneasy looks, the kind soldiers give each other before a mission they know might be their last. By the time they reached the landing pad, the base looked like a nest of angry insects. Soldiers sprinted between gun turrets, repair crews tried to bring down shields back online, and officers shouted into comms that mostly returned only static. Yet in the middle of all this chaos, Lyra stopped at the edge of the pad and tilted her head like she was listening to something no one else could hear. Finally she spoke. "We need a ship. Fast and armed." The sergeant frowned. "To go where?" "To talk to someone who might still owe me a favor," Lyra said. The squad looked at each other. In their experience, favors in this galaxy usually came with explosives attached. Before anyone could argue, a sudden crash of thunder overhead made them all flinch. A fighter skidded across the landing pad, smoking and half on fire, scattering soldiers in every direction. The pilot tumbled out, swearing in 3 languages, and staggered straight into Lyra's path. "Keys," she said simply, holding out her hand. The pilot blinked at her through his cracked helmet. "Who are you?" She showed him the tattoo on her arm. His face went pale. Without a word, he dropped the ship's access card in her palm and limped off as if hoping no one would ever associate him with whatever was about to happen next. The enforcers followed Lyra up the ramp, still exchanging nervous looks. Sergeant Harrow, climbing aboard last, muttered under his breath that this was either going to be the most heroic mission of their lives or the stupidest. Once in the air, the pilotless ship hummed toward the upper atmosphere, the planet's curve spreading below them like a cracked shield. Enemy fighters darted in the distance, but none approached, as if they were under orders to let this one pass. That worried the squad more than if they had been attacked. "Where exactly are we going?" the sergeant asked finally. Lyra leaned against the cockpit frame, watching the stars ahead. "There's a man named Kalen Dras on Draven 9, she said. "Weapons smuggler. Information broker. Coward. If anyone knows what Draven wants, it's him." Vess made a face. "Never heard of him." "You wouldn't have," she said. "Unless you've bought illegal plasma cannons while pretending to be a priest." That shut everyone up for a while. When they reached orbit, the scale of Draven's fleet became clear. Massive cruisers blotted out stars, smaller escorts swarmed like insects, and at the center floated the Doomsday engine itself, a dark shape so huge it made even the warships near it look like toys. Its surface glimmered faintly, covered in strange geometry that seemed to shift when you looked at it too long. Vess whistled softly. "That thing looks like it eats moons for breakfast." "It probably does," Harrow muttered. Lyra said nothing, but her eyes never left the weapon as they jumped into hyperspace. Draven 9 was a different world entirely. Where Elysian Prime had military order and chain of command, Draven 9 was chaos wrapped in neon lights and smog. The kind of place where you could buy a black market battle tank, a forged Imperial passport, and a singing parrot in the same alleyway if you knew the right people. The enforcers followed Lyra through streets buzzing with drones and vendors shouting about discounted explosives. Somewhere in the distance, music pounded from a nightclub shaped like a giant skull. Vess muttered that if they didn't get shot here, it would be a miracle. They found Kalen Dras in a bar that smelled like old oil and broken promises. He was a thin man with cybernetic eyes that whirred softly when he looked at them, and a smile that suggested he trusted no one and liked no one either. Lyra slid into the seat across from him. "Hello, Kalen," she said. His metal eyes focused on her, then on the tattoo on her arm. For the first time, the smile faltered. "I thought you were dead," he said slowly. "So did a lot of people," Lyra replied. Kalen's gaze flicked to the enforcers, then back to her. "If you came for weapons, you're out of luck. Draven's fleet bought everything worth selling 2 months ago." "I came for information," she said. "That costs extra." She leaned forward slightly. "So we're replacing both your eyes when I rip them out if you waste my time." The enforcers exchanged glances. Vess mouthed a silent reminder that they were supposed to be the terrifying ones here, not the nurse. Kalen hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. He wants the Starforge key. Rumor says it can control the Doomsday engine. Some ancient tech left behind by whoever built that thing. Without the key it's just a big gun. With the key it becomes something worse." "And where is it?" Lyra asked. Kalen's cybernetic eyes clicked nervously. "Last I heard, locked in a vault on Draven 9. But getting to it means slicing through security drones, mercenaries, and half the city guard because everyone knows what it's worth." The sergeant groaned. "So a suicide mission. Fantastic." Before Lyra could respond, the door slammed open and a bounty hunter squad stepped in, armor painted with Draven's crest. "Dead or alive," the leader said, raising his rifle. "Orders are orders." Kalen dove under the table. The enforcers scrambled for cover as plasma bolts ripped through the bar. Bottles exploded, furniture splintered, patrons screamed and ran. Lyra calmly grabbed a fallen rifle, checked the charge, and in 3 shots dropped the first 3 hunters before anyone else had even taken aim. Harrow cursed, firing from behind the bar counter. "Why does every trip we take end with someone trying to kill us?" he shouted over the noise. Because you follow me now, Lyra said, already moving toward the exit as the last bounty hunter fell. She tossed the rifle aside and kept walking while smoke rose behind her. The enforcers scrambled after her, realizing two things very quickly. First, Draven wanted her dead badly enough to send killers across half the galaxy. Second, she was terrifyingly good at staying alive. When they reached the street again, Vess panted, "So we get this Starforge key before Draven does, right?" Lyra didn't slow down. "We get it first," she said. "Or there won't be a galaxy left to argue about." The Starforge vault sat at the heart of Draven 9 like a spider in a web, surrounded by layers of security that made even the enforcers whistle under their breath when they saw the schematics Kalen grudgingly handed over. Force fields, combat drones, auto turrets, and mercenaries armed with enough firepower to level a city block. The kind of place sane people avoided unless they had a death wish or a small army. The enforcers had neither, but they did have Lyra, which was starting to feel like carrying a very sharp blade with no handle. Useful, but dangerous to anyone holding it too long. "We go in quiet, grab the key, get out before anyone knows we were there," Lyra said as they crouched in an alley overlooking the first checkpoint. Vess raised an eyebrow. "Have you noticed we tend to be the opposite of quiet wherever we go?" "That is because you talk too much," Lyra said, already moving before anyone could argue. The first few minutes actually went smoothly. The enforcers took out the perimeter guards with silenced darts, Harrow sliced into the security console to loop camera feeds, and Lyra handled a trio of drones with quick precision that made the squad wonder how much combat training a medic was supposed to have. They moved like shadows through the outer corridors, adrenaline pumping as they reached the main atrium where the vault doors loomed behind layers of glowing shields. Then the sergeant sneezed. The sound echoed like a thunderclap through the chamber. Every turret in the room whirred to life. "So much for quiet," Harrow muttered as the first volley of plasma fire lit up the air. The enforcers dove for cover, returning fire while Vess frantically tried to shut down the turrets from a nearby console. Lyra darted between cover points, her movements sharp and efficient, taking out drones with single, precise shots. To the squad it felt less like fighting alongside a nurse and more like fighting beside a ghost from the old war legends, one that did not waste bullets or breath. Finally Vess whooped as the turrets powered down with a dying hiss. "See? Totally under control," he said a moment before the floor panel beneath him opened and a security droid the size of a small truck rose out of the ground, weapons spinning. "Under control," Harrow repeated flatly as they scrambled again. The fight dragged through the atrium in a storm of shouting, gunfire, and exploding furniture. By the time the droid collapsed in a smoking heap, the enforcers were panting, bruised, and out of patience. Lyra, as always, looked like she had just finished a light jog. They reached the vault doors finally, the last barrier between them and the Starforge key. The lock was a massive, ancient mechanism pulsing with faint blue light, covered in markings that did not match any known language. Harrow stared at it. "Anyone know how to open alien death locks?" Lyra stepped forward without hesitation. "I do." The squad watched as she ran her fingers along the symbols, pressing certain points in a pattern that seemed random until the light changed color and the massive door rumbled open. Vess gaped. "How do you know how to do that?" "Because the people who built this vault built other things too," Lyra said. "Like the Doomsday Engine." Before they could ask more, alarms blared. The mercenaries guarding the inner levels had finally realized someone was inside. "Go," Lyra snapped, grabbing the key from its pedestal. It was a small object, no larger than her hand, shaped like two interlocking shards of crystal pulsing with faint energy. She shoved it into a pouch on her belt as boots pounded toward them from every corridor. The enforcers fought their way back through the maze of corridors, retreat turning into chaos as enemy fire chewed through walls and ricocheted off metal beams. Somewhere behind them, a deep mechanical voice announced lockdown protocol in a language none of them understood but whose meaning was obvious when blast doors began slamming shut one by one. They sprinted through the last open exit just before it sealed, the noise of mercenaries pounding on the other side echoing behind them. Smoke filled the air, alarms howled, and the whole building shook as someone set off explosives in the chaos. When they finally burst back into the night streets, the enforcers were gasping for breath and covered in dust. Lyra alone looked completely steady as she led them into the warren of alleys before anyone could follow. "We got it," Ves panted, clutching his rifle like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "We actually got it." For half a second it seemed like they had won. Then a voice drifted from the shadows. "Hand it over." The squad spun around to see one of their own standing there. Corporal Dren. Quiet, reliable, the kind of soldier no one noticed much. He was pointing his rifle at them now with an expression as blank as stone. "Dren, what are you doing?" the sergeant demanded. "Orders," Dren said simply. "Real orders. Not from command. From the people who actually run things." "You mean Draven?" Harrow growled. Dren did not answer, but the look in his eyes was enough. Lyra watched him steadily. "You were the mole." He shrugged like it was nothing personal. "The winning side always writes the history books," he said. "Might as well be on the right one." Before he could fire, Lyra moved faster than anyone expected. One moment she stood still, the next his rifle was on the ground and he was clutching his arm where she had struck like lightning. The enforcers disarmed him as he cursed, but there was no time for explanations. The sky above was already glowing with the fire of incoming ships. Lyra turned to the squad, her voice calm but carrying the weight of command none of them thought to question anymore. "Draven knows we have the key now. He will come for it himself." The ground shook as the first enemy dropships slammed into the streets nearby. Harrow checked his rifle grimly. "Then we hold him off long enough to finish this," he said. The battle for Draven 9 began before dawn, though in the perpetual smog-choked twilight of the planet it was hard to tell where night ended and morning began. The enforcers gathered on the roof of a half-collapsed building overlooking the plaza where Draven's forces had landed, the Starforge key strapped to Lyra's belt as if it were just another tool instead of the most dangerous artifact in the galaxy. Enemy troops spread below like an armored tide, setting up artillery while drones circled the sky like metallic vultures. The Doomsday engine hung above the planet, a shadow blotting out stars, silent and waiting for its master's command. The sergeant crouched beside Lyra, scanning the growing army with binoculars. "You got a plan for this," he muttered, "because I'm running out of ideas that don't involve dying in the next 10 minutes. Lyra studied the enemy lines, her expression unreadable. "We go through them," she said. "Straight to Draven." Ves made a strangled sound that might have been a laugh. "Through them," he repeated. "That's the plan?" "It worked before," Lyra said. "When?" Harrow demanded. "Once," she said, and started checking the charge on her rifle. The enforcers exchanged looks that said they would rather be anywhere else but followed her anyway as she descended into the smoke-filled streets. They moved from cover to cover while artillery thundered, the ground trembling beneath their boots as the first wave of enemy troops advanced. Plasma bolts turned the air into a storm of light and heat. The enforcers returned fire, but it was clear Draven's forces outnumbered them 10-1. In the chaos, a tall figure in black armor emerged from the smoke at the far end of the plaza. Even from a distance his presence carried weight like gravity itself, soldiers parting instinctively to let him pass. Draven, the warlord who had burned half the galaxy and vanished like a ghost, now returned with a weapon capable of ending everything. His helmet hid his face, but his voice carried clearly across the battlefield as he raised one gauntleted hand. "Bring me the key," he commanded. The enemy troops surged forward. The enforcers fought like cornered wolves, but they were being pushed back step by step until Lyra vaulted onto the wreck of a transport and fired a single shot into the air. The sound cut through the battle like a blade. "Draven," she shouted, her voice carrying over the gunfire. "You want it? Come get it." The warlord turned his helmet toward her, and for a moment the battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Then he began walking forward alone, each step measured, confident, like a man certain of victory. Harrow cursed under his breath. "Either he's insane or we are," he muttered, ducking behind a wall as plasma fire scorched the air above him. Lyra dropped from the transport as Draven approached, the key glinting at her belt. His voice was calm but cold. "I thought you died with the rest of your order." "You missed," she said simply. He studied her for a long moment. Give me the key, Lyra. This galaxy has rotted under weak rulers and endless war. With the engine I can burn it clean. Start over. That is what you said last time, she replied, and millions died before you even lit the first fire. His helmet tilted slightly. You think you can stop me? Alone? She smiled faintly. Who said I was alone? The enforcers struck then, a sudden coordinated assault from rooftops and alleys, grenades and plasma fire tearing into Draven's troops. For a few heartbeats the enemy lines faltered, chaos rippling through their ranks. Draven moved like a storm through the crossfire, shrugging off blasts that would have killed lesser men, closing the distance to Lyra with terrifying speed. Their fight crashed through the plaza in a blur of blades and gunfire, Lyra's movements sharp and precise against Draven's raw power. He swung a massive blade crackling with energy, carving chunks from walls and pavement as she dodged, striking back with quick calculated blows aimed at weak points in his armor. Sparks flew where steel met steel, the noise ringing above the chaos of battle. The enforcers tried to reach her but were driven back by waves of enemy soldiers. Harrow barked orders, covering her with sniper fire while Vess lobbed grenades into advancing troops, the explosions shaking windows from their frames. But the enemy kept coming, and Draven fought like a man carved from iron, each strike forcing Lyra back another step toward the edge of the plaza. Finally he caught her arm, wrenching the rifle away and hurling it aside. His other hand seized the key from her belt. Victory radiated from him like heat. It is over, he said. Lyra's gaze flicked to the key in his hand, then back to his helmeted face. No, she said softly. It isn't. She pressed something on her wrist. For a split second nothing happened. Then the key flared with blinding light and a surge of energy ripped through Draven's armor, throwing him backward with a roar. He hit the ground hard, the key skidding from his grasp as his troops froze in shock. Lyra snatched it up before he could rise. What did you do? He snarled, struggling to his feet as sparks flickered across his damaged armor. Reprogrammed it, she said. The Doomsday engine only answers to me now. Overhead, the massive weapon began to shift, its dark surface blazing with new lines of light as it turned slowly away from the planet toward Draven's own fleet. His soldiers hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks as the weapon they had come to rely on suddenly aimed at them. Draven roared in fury, charging her again, but this time the enforcers cut him off, pouring fire into his path as Harrow grabbed Lyra's arm. We have to go, now. She backed toward the extraction point as the Doomsday engine fired for the first time in centuries, a single beam of impossible light lancing through the sky. It carved through Draven's flagship like paper, the explosion blooming in silent fire above the atmosphere as the rest of his fleet scattered in panic. The ground shook with the force of it. Soldiers on both sides fled as debris rained down, the plaza turning into chaos. Draven himself vanished into the smoke, his armor torn, his plans burning around him as the enforcers dragged Lyra toward their waiting transport. The last thing they saw before the hatch closed was the Doomsday engine hovering silently above, its allegiance changed, its power now in the hands of the one person Draven had never expected to survive. The smoke over Draven 9 had barely begun to thin when the enforcer's transport lifted off, engines whining as it clawed its way through the polluted skies. Inside, the squad sat in stunned silence, bruised and burned, the taste of ash and victory thick in the air. Below them, the warlord's army scattered in chaos, their leader vanished in the destruction, their fleet crippled by the very weapon they had brought to dominate the galaxy. The Doomsday engine still hung above like a silent god, its weapon ports cooling after the single devastating shot that had ended the battle. It was hard to believe it had answered to Lyra now, this woman they had mocked just hours before as nothing more than a backwater nurse with a strange tattoo. The sergeant finally broke the silence. So, he said slowly, we are just going to ignore the fact that we now have the most powerful weapon in the known galaxy following our ship around like a very angry pet? Lyra sat near the back, the Starforge key resting in her hands. Its faint glow reflected off her face, calm but unreadable. It is not following you, she said. It is following me. That makes me feel so much better, Vess muttered. The sergeant gave him a look before turning back to Lyra. So what now? Command will want this thing. They will probably want you too. She shook her head. Command cannot be trusted. Neither can the Council or any of the governments scrambling to claim the ashes Draven left behind. Give them the engine and they will fight wars over who gets to push the button first. Harrow leaned forward, his voice low. Then what do you plan to do with it? Lyra studied the key for a long moment before answering. The same thing the Bloodstar Order tried to do before everything went wrong. Take it out of the game. Permanently. The enforcers exchanged uneasy looks. Destroy it, the sergeant asked. If I can, she said. If not, bury it where no one will ever find it again. The transport shook as it broke through the upper atmosphere, stars spilling across the viewport like shards of ice. Behind them the Doomsday engine moved slowly, keeping its distance, a silent sentinel waiting for instructions. Vess finally said what the others were thinking. You know Draven is not dead, right? Lyra nodded. He will crawl out of whatever hole he landed in. Men like him always do. Then he will come for that key again, Harrow said. Let him, she replied. Next time he will not find me so easy to corner. The transport docked at the nearest loyal fleet carrier, a battered warship that had taken a beating during the initial assault but was still holding position above the planet. Soldiers and officers crowded the hangar as the enforcers disembarked, some cheering when they realized Draven's fleet was broken, others staring warily at the weapon still hovering beyond the atmosphere like a predator circling its cage. High Command will want a full report, the sergeant said as they walked the corridors toward the briefing room. They can have one, Lyra said. A very edited version. The briefing stretched for hours. Generals and admirals shouted over each other about the fate of the engine, whether it should be turned over to the Council, dismantled, studied, or hidden. Some wanted to use it as leverage to end all future wars, others to claim it before rival systems could. Through it all Lyra sat silently, the Starforge key on the table before her, until the shouting reached its peak. Enough, she said softly, but the word cut through the room like a blade. The arguing stopped. You want this weapon because you think it will give you control, she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of someone who had seen what such power always led to. But power like this does not obey anyone for long. It consumes. It corrupts. Today you would aim it at your enemies. Tomorrow at each other. That is why Draven wanted it. That is why the Bloodstar Order tried to lock it away before the betrayal that killed them. And that is why none of you can have it now. One of the admirals slammed a fist on the table. And who decides that? You? Lyra met his glare without flinching. Yes. The room erupted again, but she was already standing, the key in her hand. Before anyone could stop her she walked out, the enforcers falling in behind her without a word. Vess whispered to Harrow as they followed. Are we really about to steal the most powerful weapon in history from our own side? Looks like it, Harrow muttered. Back in the hangar the Doomsday engine waited, massive and silent. Lyra keyed the transport for launch as alarms began to sound behind them, Command realizing too late what was happening. By the time fleet security reached the bay, the ship was already cutting through the void, the engine turning to follow like a loyal hound behind its master. Hours passed in tense silence as they jumped through system after system, leaving pursuit fleets scrambling in their wake. Finally they reached the edge of known space, a region of dead stars and drifting wreckage where no one traveled unless they had to. Here, Lyra said softly. The enforcers watched as she interfaced the key with the Doomsday engine, entering coordinates in a language none of them recognized. The weapon began to glow, power building as ancient systems long dormant awoke once more. What are you doing? The sergeant asked. Sending it somewhere no one will ever reach, she said. A dead sector beyond the outer rim. No habitable worlds. No jump gates. Just empty space and gravity wells strong enough to tear ships apart. The engine powered up, surrounding itself with a cocoon of light as the coordinates locked. With a soundless flash it vanished into hyperspace, leaving nothing behind but the faint crackle of residual energy. The enforcers stared at the empty stars where it had been. So that is it, Vess said finally. Just gone. Lyra nodded. Out of reach. Out of temptation. When they returned to the fleet days later, Command was furious, but there was nothing they could do. The weapon was gone, Draven's forces shattered, and the Bloodstar legacy sealed once more in mystery and myth. The enforcers were offered medals, promotions, entire planets' worth of commendations. Lyra refused them all. She left the fleet the next morning without ceremony, vanishing into the galaxy with only the clothes on her back and the scars of too many wars. No one knew where she went. Some said she hunted the remnants of Draven's army. Others claimed she disappeared into some quiet corner of space to live as the nurse she had once pretended to be. Months later, a memorial was raised on Elysian Prime for those who had fallen in the battle. The enforcers stood at attention as the names were read, but when they looked to the edge of the crowd they saw her there, watching silently.